Hey, Dan.
Good afternoon.
Hey, Ben.
Howdy.
All right, can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep, can hear you okay.
Realize I've been listening to too much music today. Well, not too much music. There's never too much music, and I had to get my AirPods recharged for this.
Has it mostly been Daft Punk?
Not exactly.
They're very popular this week since they broke up. So I've heard.
I saw that they were like the #1 thing on Wikipedia.
Who are these people? What are these people? I know a bunch of the slides that I hid are still in place in the slideshow, but I'm presuming those won't end up on screen.
No, they shouldn't.
Okay. Sounds good.
It's been quite the week, hasn't it?
Yep, feels like 40 hours for only a 3-day week for me.
And that's with 2 meetings that didn't even happen. Amazingly enough. Is Old Town mostly restored with power or still struggling?
Well, I think it's only been like one street this whole time.
Okay.
So mainly, so I haven't heard a status update here last couple of days.
Well, definitely not easy if you live on that street.
No. Welcome, Kim and Miranda.
Hello. You? The debris pile is still growing out there.
That's right, you were out there again.
Yeah,
Is the whole parking lot filled yet?
not quite. I hope somebody shows up.
Me too.
I was most excited for this one.
Me too. How many people did you get yesterday evening?
So attendees, we ended up what, 15?
Yeah, that's good.
I had people say they were interested, so.
Yeah, I think the group last night was sort of the beginning. I think it'll pick up as folks take notice and talk to their neighbors and things get more real. You always get more participants when there's something proposed at the end. But pretty good engaged group and informed group last night, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. And a few folks who will want to come back for the Old Town meeting too, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a one-on-one meeting with Tina and Mark tomorrow afternoon, so that'll be interesting. They're the ones that were asking about Old Town. Give folks a couple minutes here. Welcome, Roseanne. We're giving a couple more minutes for others to join us before we jump in. And Roseanne, I'm going to go ahead and promote you to panelist since it's going to be a smaller group, so we can all talk like a normal Zoom meeting.
Well, that's perfect because I just got off of a phone call. So thanks, Stan.
Yeah, not a problem. So Roseanne, maybe you can help gauge us. I mean, from the home builders in across all the jurisdictions, how, I mean, I know you're engaged representing the home builders, but how your builders, I mean, how engaged are they in this? What's the level of interest in this in middle housing in this process at this point?
Oh yeah, no, there's substantial engagement and interest in wanting to track what the allowed opportunities are going to be in not only in Frog Pond West, but subsequently in Frog Pond East and South, as well as obviously in your other planned development. Is that what you call them?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so obviously any additional housing opportunities are a boon for the community, are a boon for, you know, the region, considering the historic underproduction across the state and especially in the Portland metro region. So, you know, talking about additional housing units specifically that can be either turned into or initially established as an opportunity to own a home is probably where our members tend to go, because fewer of them build rental. Although with the smaller, less institutional renter product like a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex, that's more attractive because an owner or a property buyer that would buy a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex can get financing and then rent out the other units, live in one, for example, rent out the other unit or units, and can get that financing easier than they can for a 5+ unit. So that 4-unit option is still significantly viable for even someone such as yourself or myself that would be interested in renting out additional units and living in one.
Great. Well, thank you for those initial thoughts. So I'm not sure how many more we're going to get, but Roseanne, let's kind of regroup here. I don't know if we need all the consultants and staff here to have conversation with Roseanne, but Roseanne, if you have the time, we'd like to go ahead and have this conversation with you and any of the other builders or developers that join us here in the next little bit.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't see any of them on here. We announced this multiple times through our different communication channels through the HBA, but I think it's actually to your credit that perhaps it's just me, because you've done such a good job of outreach yourself and connecting with individual property owners and developers separately. So congratulations. No, I don't know how many you've sat down with one-on-one. I do know a couple of examples of that, so.
Yeah.
Roseanne, do you feel like, this is Miranda, do you feel like there are is there a subset of kind of members of the HBA that really focus on middle housing product or who are moving more towards that?
Yes, there's definitely a contingent that have always done middle housing, you know, especially like the 2 and 3 plex options. Usually fee simple, so having that invisible property line down the middle, but being able to be bought and sold individually has been, yeah, that's been something that a lot of our members have done for even before this, well before this bill was passed.
Do you have any folks who are looking into cottage housing or who have done it?
Yeah, so the builder developer that comes to mind, and I would say is probably like the foremost in the field expert, is Hayden Homes. They actually build a lot in Bend area and have done really robust cottage cluster models and taken them from start to finish in Bend, as well as they're building in Hood River. I don't know if they have any cottage clusters in Hood River, but they build in Hood River as well. So they're HBA members. They're not directly tied with our local association, but we work with them kind of tangentially on policy issues like cottage clusters, for example. We also have, so there's more locally, Portland Houseworks has been doing, they've done several cottage cluster projects in Portland, despite Portland not having a cottage cluster code yet. So I can send you some photos of that if you haven't already discovered them.
Yeah, I actually wondered if maybe you could, if we don't get folks today, I was actually wondering like maybe there's a way that you could help us bring folks in to have a conversation. You know, we have a few developers who we've partnered with a lot, but I think that there's kind of different builders focus on different types of products. And so from our perspective, I think we're interested in meeting with people who are doing more of these different kinds of products. And sometimes like a builder who's doing cottage housing isn't necessarily doing a lot of these other middle housing types, or you have folks who do a lot of like duplexes, triplexes, but don't do cottage. And so it might be having to meet with like multiple people in order to get kind of the different middle housing types attracted to Wilsonville or interested in Wilsonville where maybe they haven't worked before. So I think that's kind of part of what we were, I think, in some ways hoping to do today is just to like talk to builders about what we're doing in Wilsonville, what we're considering, get input in terms of what works and doesn't work, but also trying to build those relationships to potentially see more middle housing types as we move forward. So just trying to kind of figure out who's doing it and who's doing it in the suburbs. And
so what we're doing in some jurisdictions is like staff will plan a presentation. So I'll be presenting, for example, in another city with a developer builder who has done attached product in that city before, like maybe several years ago, but hasn't done anything recently. So kind of talking about some challenges and opportunities and the fact that they would love to do more and kind of how they could see it working. And so I think for you guys, I don't know, I don't know if you'd be open to it. Maybe, I don't know. I know your planning commission is probably gonna come back on Frog Pond West with some more siting and design topics, it sounded like, for the triplex and quadplex. But it sounds like they were moving forward with allowing them in allowing duplex and townhomes. So are you specifically wanting like a presentation to you as staff, or like a discussion with staff? Do you want a presentation to your planning commission? Do you want just an open dialogue with the planning commission?
I think as staff at this point, we're just interested in talking to as many developers who do as many product types as possible, especially folks who maybe haven't worked in Wilsonville before. But it looks like we've gotten a few additional participants, and so I don't want to sidetrack us too much. We're going to actually get into some of this if and I can kind of turn it back to Dan to think about what he would like to do.
Sure.
Awesome. Yes, I see Taylor Morrison folks here, so that's great.
Yeah. Elena and Chris, good to see you. So for those in the group that don't know you, Elena and Chris, can you introduce yourselves?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi, so I'm Elena Robertson. I'm the division president for Taylor Morrison, formerly William Lyon Homes, formerly Polygon Northwest. So we have a long history in Wilsonville. I've been back in the division since 2019, but had been here from 11 to 14, really picking up on Villebois 2 and running sales and marketing at that point in time from 11 to 14. So excited to be back down in this market. Sad that we're kind of coming up on the end of our land opportunities in Villebois, but have definitely loved the partnership, have appreciated all of the things that Dan has put up with us for many years. Very grateful for that partnership. But yeah, so I'm here representing Taylor Morrison, and I see Chris Walther is on here too, if he wants to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Walther, same as Elena, except VP of Forward Planning. And yes, I'm very sad that Villebois is coming to an end, but there's always future opportunities in Wilsonville, I'm sure.
Thank you. And so let me just introduce the city and consultant team we have here. And I think, you know, our numbers are few, but the few that we have with us today, I think you three have a lot of wealth of knowledge and experience with Wilsonville that will really be beneficial to help us understand how we can do this work we're doing the best we can. So allow me to introduce, first of all, Joe Dills with Angelo Planning Group. He's the project manager helping us out with this, has a lot of experience in Wilsonville and large master plans, including in Frog Pond. Also have Ben Weber with Sarah Architects. Ben is really focused on a lot of the design aspects and those design standards and siting standards, and helping us understand those and giving us some expertise there, and really appreciate his help. From the city side, we have Miranda Bateshell, our planning director, Kim Reibold, our senior planner, who's done a lot of work with housing as well, and Georgia McAllister, assistant planner, who's seen many Taylor Morrison site plan. So, and I appreciate Taylor Morrison coming, because they have, I mean, they've built more middle housing in Wilsonville than anyone else. So, and know what it's like, particularly in the Villebois context. So, you know, I think, Joe, for you, I think let's kind of change on the fly if we can here. I know Roseanne has plenty of knowledge about House Bill 2001 and what it's all about. Elena and Chris, maybe you can kind of just fill us in on, first curious, you know, what your understanding is, or do you have any questions about exactly what is House Bill 2001? And then maybe we can touch on kind of where we are on how it's going to impact Wilsonville. And I know I've been talking to Stacy Connery about how it can potentially impact what's left in Villebois, but happy to answer any of those questions. So I really just want to get direction from you of things that you're wondering about, of kind of where the city is in the process, what's happening, timeline. And then I know we have some specific questions for you that we'd like your input on as well.
Sure, I can kick it off, and then Chris, feel free to interrupt and reorganize my thoughts for me. So I would say that we are pretty all in on what the opportunities are from House Bill 2001. And to be totally honest, the education that really launched really the repositioning effort that we've been focusing on at Taylor Morrison since I got down here in 2019, that education came from the HBA. So I see Roseanne on here. And we really had, I had just a really great experience when we went over the state legislature changes, especially with House Bill 2001 back in, I think it was September of 19 that we did the luncheon, maybe in October. And we've really shaped what our business has been and will be repositioning to around the opportunity to introduce more middle housing. One of the things that we've become very, very aware of, especially in the home building sphere, is how oversupplied we are in certain product types and how dramatically undersupplied we are in others. And so, Dan, like you mentioned, you know, middle housing has kind of been a product type that has existed within our wheelhouse as the private business with Polygon. Obviously, we can see that in Villebois today with Sienna, with the condos, and which, by the way, has we opened those up for sales in January, just as an update for you guys, and it's been going gangbusters. Market acceptance, people have been very excited to have that product and that last building done. Which is really speaks to the need for those lower price points. Buyers are desperate for opportunity to get into home ownership, which we all know correlates to wealth growth for individuals. And so that first step into single level condo housing is really what middle housing is about. And then obviously with Mont Blanc coming up, I mean, we only have 2 buildings left to sell in Mont Blanc, if you can believe it. Those have also been very, very well received. And honestly, it was the first time that we've brought new townhome product into the Portland market. So the brownstone style floor plan was actually a product that we kicked off in the Seattle market, brought down here and made to fit the Wilsonville and Villebois master plan concepts, and has been received really well. And so a lot of the product creation that Chris has been spearheading for us is around middle housing, is around duplex and triplex executions, and in a 2-story execution versus what we've historically and traditionally done, which was a 3-story. And so we actually are about to be rolling out a middle housing specific product line through Taylor Morrison as part of a regional branding effort. And so when this stakeholder meeting came up, it's really perfect timing. We've had quite a few conversations with the city of Tigard, primarily just because of our massive land holding that we have there. There's just a lot of future opportunity for us there that doesn't have fully entitled parcels. So we've been able to make some moves there. We've been having conversations with the city of Beaverton very preliminarily. And I think the question that we really have is kind of the same question we've had to ask those cities is, what is your plan of execution for this? I think we all know from a builder position, we all day long would love to be stewards of our communities and providing housing for all types of qualifying abilities from a mortgage perspective. But we are a for-profit business. And when we look at the fee structures that exist for single family and how those apply to a multifamily execution, trying to get innovative in a way that we would be able to translate those savings to our customers, because on the flip side, when those increases come to us as the builder, unfortunately, they do end up bearing out down to the customer level. So we've seen dramatic increases in land value. Obviously, we're dramatically undersupplied with land for development in general. So value for land sellers has skyrocketed. They're not giving us any deals because they want to get theirs, and we get it. We totally understand. But then significant cost increase on the land development side. Then on the vertical side, for a period of time, we were seeing 1% a month increases in vertical construction costs. And all it's done is continue to push and push and push what the price has to be in order for us just to have an operating margin to sustain the staff that we just have as a builder, right? We have 65 families that we are responsible for supporting, and then having the opportunity to reinvest in the community with new land acquisition to bring more product to market. And we all know with the undersupply of housing, even with the addition of Frog Pond, specifically in Wilsonville, we've seen prices appreciate dramatically. And that really comes from just a traditional economic supply and demand curve. You've got low supply, high demand, prices escalate. And we're very much back into a bidding war world that we've not had for several years and took a little break from, but seems to be returning. And you see it across the board, across just the Portland submarket, massive price increases from the other national builders. I mean, to the tune of $15,000 to $20,000 in base price, just in a fell swoop. No real methodology other than, hey, there's a market to capture and we have opportunity to do that. We've not done that at Taylor Morrison. Ours have been incremental relative to how the pacing has gone for sales. But the middle housing particular, that vein of product is a product that we want to incorporate into existing single family. So I think it would be difficult unless we found something really innovative on the fee side and design side to do an all middle housing neighborhood of scale. And by scale, I mean really anything over maybe 30 units. And I think you guys are probably a little familiar with some of our stuff. Our communities tend to be over 150 homes, with the exception of Villebois, because we had so many assemblages that all kind of rolled together. So we designed them at scale, even though they may have been a smaller group. But that's where the efforts that we're doing, particularly in Tigard at the moment, was an introduction of middle housing in partnership with traditional single family detached, which actually I think is going to lend itself to a much more compelling streetscape because you're not going to have just that cookie cutter thing that everybody is so over. And so looking to create variability in elevation style, in pedestrian interfacing. I think you guys are familiar. We've obviously had the regional park systems throughout Villebois, but we do regional parks in partnerships with THPRD throughout the rest of the region too. So we want to have that connectivity. We want to have that pedestrian connectivity and interfacing as well. And that's where we think middle housing is going to get integrated into communities, as opposed to necessarily being 150 units exclusively as middle housing. I think the execution and the cost of that is tough, especially when we get into the attached. It's all attached. Fire rating from a cost perspective and a time perspective to build is very cumbersome and very expensive. And then of course, there's also the fears and concerns around condo litigation for other builders who don't live in the multifamily sphere and don't have the building envelope expertise and experience that we have. There's just a long period of time that a builder is held responsible for attached product, right? So there has to be this risk reward trade-off considered when we do those things. And it also becomes tough again when it isn't at scale, right? So when it is only 30-ish units, do we get efficiencies in building cycles? Do we get efficiencies in product purchasing? So that's the long rambling. We've got lots of stuff going on middle housing. We talk about it a lot. I am a recovering salesperson, so I will blather forever if you don't stop me. So Chris, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
You summed it up very well, Elena, on that part. And yeah, to Elena's point, I mean, it kind of does boil down to not having a master plan community that's all middle housing by any means, because that just won't work from our perspective, from cycle times and the litigation side that we have to look at. But it kind of boils down to what Elena talked about at the beginning when she started saying about, you know, what's the city's approach? How are they going to approach the middle housing as far as is it going to be how the SDC fees are going to be based? How if there's going to be any development agreements with that to help off on maybe some of the offsite improvements or anything of that to serve those communities? Because if you're going to have missing the middle housing, you know, is it going to have to increase the infrastructure for future developments? And just, you know, looking at it from a big picture, you know, what is the city's approach moving forward now that we're finally to this point?
Great, thank you. Great questions and great comments. Thank you. Maybe let's jump. Joe, I'm going to jump to the slide with our time frame, because I think just kind of talking about our time frame and how that relates to this execution you're talking about.
Yep, sounds good.
Just add very broadly, as you find that slide, that, you know, the city of Wilsonville, we have always tried to be very innovative and smart and inclusive in our housing planning. We're very proud of Villebois. We're proud of the partnerships there. We're proud of the neighborhood that got built there, and the people who live there love it there. So from our perspective, I think we see middle housing as an opportunity. We see it as an important part of the housing spectrum and housing choices in the community. We'd love to see it fully integrated into our future neighborhoods. We're excited about the opportunity for even infill redevelopment, although we see that as taking longer here just because we're such a young city with a young housing supply and areas that are new to the urban growth boundary. We're open as to what that means and what that looks like. You know, there's certain things from the state we're required to do, but where we have room to make some of our own decisions, we want to do that in a way that makes sense for planning here, but also works for the development community, which is why we're having these meetings. So I would just say that, like, for us, it's an important value. How we get there, we don't have all of that worked out yet, and that's part of what this project is and what you're going to hear from Dan and the team on today. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Miranda. So you'll see up here the project timeline, but I share this first of all to explain how it fits in kind of this overall Wilsonville story of housing. You know, we've done master planning for years, including Villebois, and we've recently, last year, we adopted our equitable housing strategic plan. So one thing I'd like to stress in these conversations with the community and others is, you know, we're implementing House Bill 2001, but there's also a lot of local policy that plays into this. It's also behind what we're trying to do. It's not just the state made us do it, but that there's local policy and discussions that are pushing this forward as well. And so we're actually working on adopting this earlier. We end up being about 8 months before we're required, primarily because we're getting ready to jump into the Frog Pond East and South master planning, which will be that new urban area, which will be a lot more of more land, a variety of housing anticipated over there. And as part of that, we're playing in terms of the question about the fees, we're playing in that a little bit during this project, but certainly it's kind of a more robust discussion of that as part of that Frog Pond East and South master planning and financing discussion. And so in terms of how we're executing, we're really thinking about this, tailoring it to different areas or different situations that we have in town, and thinking about each of these areas differently. So, you know, as mentioned, Frog Pond East and South, we're thinking that future master planned area, we have to consider that separately. There's slightly different rules that apply there that are slight but substantial and impactful. We're looking at our master planned areas under development. You know, Villabaugh for the most part, with the level it's built out, not a lot of changes, but maybe even one-on-one sometime we can talk more about where our thoughts are on as it relates to the remaining land that I know Taylor Morrison's been in discussions for some time about. I'm happy to talk about that. I don't know if this is the right venue to get into the details of your financing and ideas out there, but I know I've talked to Stacy Connery a bit about it, but happy to continue those conversations. But then Frog Pond West, we've really been talking about how to do it there. We actually need to modify that master plan a little bit so it qualifies for certain standards. We need to up the density allowed there from about 6.5 to 8 units an acre at least, in order to use certain rules applying to these master plans under development. And at the same time, we're also really looking at older neighborhoods with larger lots in the community, or neighborhoods that may be available for some redevelopment, and how can we best pave the way for that to appropriately happen in those neighborhoods. So we're looking at all those different scenarios, and execution in those different scenarios kind of tailored to those specific scenarios. So Joe, I think with that, we have enough background. Did you want to go ahead and we've kind of talked a little about Frog Pond, but we talked about questions.
Yep.
Actually, this is Roseanne. I have another question. Could you go back to the timeline?
Yeah.
Could you give me a rough approximation on when the infrastructure conversations specifically are going to take place, and the infrastructure analyses that need to take place specifically for Frog Pond West and or any other, you know, planned development areas that are already existing that you need to apply the, you know, conforming, legal non-conforming, et cetera?
So right now we have the various consultants that have worked on our infrastructure plans, doing kind of some sensitivity analysis, some modeling. They're just getting started on that, working to have some of that initial work wrapped up here by the end of March. And then seeing from there, really, are we looking at any substantial impacts, or where are areas that we need to pay attention to? And then once we understand that better, we can know how much we really need to start looking at any of our infrastructure master plans. You know, Wilsonville is unique that a lot of it are these planned unit developments, and a lot of them have CC&Rs that are going to limit middle housing for the time being. So we're really, you know, to the best of our knowledge, because we don't know the exact language of all the CC&Rs, looking at areas that would not have those restrictions and may have larger lots, and kind of focusing in on infrastructure that may be needed to support middle housing there. And then certainly we've been in conversations with developers and property owners in Frog Pond West, kind of understanding their desires and getting how much of a potential infrastructure impact there may be there. So that's in process. Again, we'll get kind of the initial work done by late March, early April, and then from there have to kind of see what next steps are based on those initial findings.
Okay, so I guess a segue question from that is there an opportunity for the development community to weigh in on kind of some creative ideas around system development charges that would be associated with SDCs in Frog Pond West and or future the future expansion areas, you know, east, south, and then undeveloped areas. So leaving the already CCNR'd areas aside.
Yeah, I think the thoughts we have now is certainly part of the scope we're thinking for east and south is to look pretty in depth on this issue. Currently, the idea for Frog Pond East and South is really, or sorry, Frog Pond West is to look at what the reality is of what's going to happen and make any changes based on the current financing plan. We don't see throwing the current financing plan out the window by any means, but adapting it as necessary based on any changes resulting from this work. And we are open to getting information and suggestions on fees as it applies to, you know, infill development. If you're adding a second unit on an existing lot, what that may look like. So any information from other jurisdictions or innovative ideas that are being implemented, we're certainly interested in that information so that we can, you know, balance everything the best we can to make sure that we have adequate infrastructure that's paid for in a efficient and equitable manner.
Yeah, so to that point, Dan, on equity, I think we're starting to see, you know, and talk with jurisdictions about how the SDC methodologies are calculated for currently, you know, for single family homes, and a lot of jurisdictions around the state just have one flat fee for a meter capacity equivalent, or, you know, a one dwelling unit equivalent for their water and or their sewer, parks, et cetera. And so looking at, you know, especially for infrastructure that is more directly correlated with usage, or with, you know, with data that can be derived towards usage, water and sewer specifically, how, you know, can we talk about, we're talking about how to get that that denominator of the SDC methodology, right? So number of units essentially will be going up with additional middle housing, but those number of units and the increase to them will be able to realize the economies of scale with, you know, all the mains, the water mains, the sewer mains, the pump stations, the treatment areas, in a way that, you know, a typical single family detached house with a meter capacity equivalent or dwelling unit equivalent won't, right? So looking at how the SDC calculation can be tweaked or, you know, revisited based on the projection for middle housing in the undeveloped areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Joe, others have any comments in response to that before I kind of wrap this topic up for now?
Well, one thing comes to mind for Frog Pond West, and maybe click up to that map just so we have a visual of it. But there's sort of two general categories of fees. Yeah, go back one. There's the SDC structure, which, yeah, thank you. The SDC structure, the city Roseanne, which of course is pretty much what you described. It was based on methodologies that were adopted, and per unit doesn't vary with whether it's a large house or a small house or middle housing. But then there is, and you may be familiar with this, there's a special infrastructure fee that was prepared for Frog Pond West. It was to handle three or four very specific infrastructure needs. The completion of the Beckman Road upgrade, a park, I think a contribution to another park, and then some sewer. And so that's a second area where if there was a discussion about how to tailor fees, then that would be part of the conversation as well. So that's what comes to mind for West.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sorry, I had a dependent enter my home office for the first part, but I think I got the gist. One example is when you have, like on the screen, a duplex or let's just say a 2-unit fee simple townhouse structure, and you have a meter drop for each of those townhomes. They are realizing, the mains and the capacity in the main can be sized, but it won't have to be necessarily double like it would for 2 single-family detached homes, right? So, and then likewise, you're probably not going to have maybe as much impervious area, for example. And granted, storm is not usually your high SDC charges anyway, but you're going to probably have, a little bit less in terms of incremental increase to your impervious area. So looking at the stormwater and how that's capitalized in terms of, 2 or more units on a parcel, or if they become subdivided, then, just utilizing that land space better.
Yeah. And one idea I'll throw out to the conversation is having it sort of just based on what we think people would build and principles of fairness and so on is one thing, but it would be really cool if that conversation were to occur with projects that are kind of on the boards for Frog Pond West, so that there were developers that were there at the table saying, hey, I'm thinking about this approach to this area and X number of units. And I say that because the infrastructure fee was calculated on projected numbers of homes that would occur. We dialed it back to be conservative, but there's the whole thing about the city needs to be assured of getting enough revenue to build that park and finish Beckman Road and so on. And anyway, to the extent that the development community could be working on semi-real or proposed projects at the time of the conversation, it would make it a much better conversation.
Agreed. It looks like, Elena, did you have something to contribute to this particular topic?
Yeah, in kind of continuation of what Roseanne was saying, I think one of the things that has come up as a question for us too in relation to fees is actually how these units will be considered as far as their building type. Are they apartment? Are they condo? Are they? We've been working through that really from a permitting perspective, and I apologize, I'm not as familiar with Wilsonville's code specifically, but where there are already carve outs for different housing types within your code that already have kind of an SDC methodology to them is one question that we've been kind of working through, because that will also change some of the parameters about the things that you're looking for from an architectural perspective. So I think that's something to consider on your side is how are you going to identify what some of these building types are when you get to a cottage cluster? Is there a specific cottage product type code that exists in Wilsonville? I know some jurisdictions have it, something separate from a single family, but cottage generally is defined by up to a certain square footage and then has its own set of requirements. Is there anything like that in Wilsonville?
Miranda, do you know, I don't know if I have anyone on the panel right now that has that answer, but it's something that we can make note of and
Yeah,
get
I
back
mean,
to
it's
you.
one of the things just with considering the SDC methodology that seems to be an easy measure to setting that denominator, if you will, is the consideration of square footage and doing a tiered program based on square footage brackets. Because again, to Roseanne's point, it's not a one-to-one increase. Just because we have added another unit of density doesn't mean it has the same amount of use coming through that unit. And so I've seen, and I believe Bend maybe did it that way, that it was a square footage, and maybe downtown Portland did as well, that it was a square footage consideration for a tiered program. So at half a point, if you will, to 3/4 of a point, and then 1 as far as like a valuation. Because I will say, you know, conversely to that, is there flexibility in the actual wet utility infrastructure for a developer of, okay, well, if we have a triplex, let's say, and we sub-meter the building so that there's only truly one connection to the main, do you still consider that 3 units, or do you consider that 1 unit if it's sized appropriately? So it's not necessarily just a straight financial calculation. There are some development opportunities that we can do in ground that maybe help mitigate some of that capacity load. I throw out the crazy idea that, you know, maybe, although to the point about, you know, you're going to have greater lot coverage when you introduce this kind of density, there's just going to be more on a lot to some degree. But potentially if we're worried about sewer capacity load, step tanks, so on-site, basically mini baby septics that reach to a certain point and get pumped annually, they would be owned by the city, could be owned by the city, but I've seen that in other jurisdictions, both between Seattle and this market. And Southwest Washington actually too, with step tanks, where we're trying to mitigate overloading sewage capacity. So you actually house the capacity on site on an annual basis, and then the public works are able to manage a schedule for bringing capacity into the system without it just being a constant flow. So I think to try to think from a different perspective too, it doesn't necessarily need to only be a solution. Because I think the concern potentially from a jurisdiction or a municipality is this fear that you're not going to get the funding that you need for the infrastructure if we're just giving builders credits and discounts. And I don't think that that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to skirt the responsibility that we have to our community to make sure that the infrastructure is there. We just want it to be fair and equitable and commensurate to, you know, what it is that we're contributing to overall growth and development in the community as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Elena. So at this point, I would say, you know, I know that both the HBA and Taylor Morrison is going to continue to work on this with a variety of jurisdictions. Please share ideas as they come up, because we are interested in solving this issue and finding the best way to do it as well. So thank you for bringing up that conversation today, and we look forward to it continuing. Because yeah, it's definitely, we understand it's an important part of this puzzle. So I note that we've had one more join us, Chelsea. If you could, the screen name's Chelsea. So if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
now we're
Hey,
hearing
oh,
you.
sorry. I had to adjust my settings there. Yeah, I'm the assistant planner with Metropolitan Land Group, and I'm just sort of listening in just because we are also curious about how all of this type of, you know, this aspect of the House bill is going to get worked out as well. So
Okay.
Just kind of staying informed.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So Joe, maybe at this point, do you want to jump into some of the discussion questions, and then hopefully we still have some more time. And if there, of course, if there's other questions, you know, we can park them at the end, send them to us. We're happy to talk one-on-one or as small groups again later as well. I mean, we have an open door to talk about this as much as we need to, but we did want to, I know from kind of a project management standpoint, wanted to get to a couple points if we could today. So Joe, if you wanted to go there.
Yeah, I think I want to, we've talked a little bit about the products that you guys build and of course seen them in the ground and everything, but let's go back to that. If you could tell us a little bit more about the types of middle housing that you directly have experience with and what has been important to the success of those products.
Well, we really haven't built any yet, Joe, to be honest with you. Our first ones are going to be built here in the city of Tigard in our River Terrace project. We've never done any middle housing yet. We've done a lot of condos in the past from in Beaverton and the west side of the 26 corridor, but we've never done technically any middle housing. We did a lot, mainly when I first came with Polygon Taylor Morrison, William Lyon Homes. We were 100% multifamily builder. It was all condominium townhomes, if you will. And then we ventured into some of the apartment complexes. But for the most part, we have not built any middle housing. And our first crack at it, if you will be in River Terrace and then so in our Beaverton area and hopefully here in Wilsonville as well.
What kind of
unit? From the definition of middle housing, though, I think that's where we have executed types that are very similar to middle housing. So in Hillsborough, we've done attached side-by-side duplex product, which is part of kind of the middle housing definition.
Yeah.
We have not ever done an ADU execution. So most of anything that would resemble middle housing, to Chris's point, is definitely generally a three-story multifamily product, attached side-by-side townhome, which we generally do as fee simple attached homes, not necessarily condo. We've done the condo in the past. As far as like a cottage cluster execution, we've not done anything like that. So really we've lived in the townhome definition for middle housing and attached side-by-side duplex. But the product that we currently have submitted for building permit is a side-by-side triplex. That's actually replacing a 60 wide single story product. So actually some of the plan types that had initially been entitled over for the Claremont property in Villebois, we're actually substituting out one of the 60 wide plans and putting in what looks like one single home from the street, actually has 3 homes going down the depth of the lot with a side loaded garage. So those are attached 2-story, and then we do have versions of those that will meet topography needs for a basement and a tuck under version. So we do have them to execute in multiple topographies. And then we are doing for the first time ever a stacked duplex, which will be single level on the bottom, single level on the top, but 2 separate owners. So both of those will be the triplex and the duplexes, stacked duplex, if you will. Currently reflect as single family units with attached ADUs, which in City of Tigard's code requires actually that garage and a living space have to be connected in order to be an ADU. So I think kind of layman's terms, when we think about ADUs, we think of the mother-in-law house, like in the backyard, like detached and in the back corner. But in Tigard's code, it actually has to be attached to the building. And those will actually be recorded as condominium and will be sub-associations to the master association that's there. So from an execution standpoint, though, we feel that it's going to be relatively similar to what we develop. And as far as apartments and the stacked flat condos go, they're just not going to be 3 stories and 32 units. They're going to be 2. So similarly there, that product also looks like just a traditional single family dwelling, just 1 unit, but it will be 2 families that'll purchase.
Let's pause on that for a moment. So to get it to look like a single family dwelling, describe that. Give me a picture of that verbally. 1 front door facing the street, build from there. What are you doing to get to that outcome?
You stand at the street, you've got a 2-car garage and then a single car garage. So you have, that's one of those things from an architectural standpoint, there has to be acceptance for a certain percentage of the frontage to be garage door, which tends to be a challenge depending on what kind of development codes you're under for architectural. So the 2-car garage is associated with the actual upstairs unit. It's the largest square footage in the home. So that garage actually has a man door to a little foyer, if you will, where the front door is, that's visible from the street. And that all sources up to the top floor. The 1-car garage then has a door straight to the back into the bottom floor unit, which only inhabits the back part of the home. So that is the bottom floor unit. And then it has a side door that is the front door for the unit. So that's the main entry is actually a side. So you basically, depending on the execution for the driveway, can be a 2-car wide driveway or a 3-car wide driveway. You can always angle that third single car. And then you would have your walkway cutting from driveway up to front, and then an extension for a sidewalk to continue or a pathway to continue back to the bottom floor unit door. And so the way that that looks like for open space for that homeowner on that lot, that's a 40 wide product too, just for clarity. So that's a 40-foot wide. And what, Chris, is it 55 deep? You're on mute. 45, 40. I think, yeah, Chris, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. It's about 50 to 55 deep. So then the downstairs unit, detached, it's one ownership there, has the full backyard as a private access for them. So they will have the private backyard for themselves. The upstairs unit, we've actually introduced a front porch that, again, we were talking about pedestrian connectivity and kind of that front door streetscape. We've introduced a large covered patio on the front of the home that becomes the outdoor space for the upstairs owner. So they don't have access to the downstairs, but they have their own private covered outdoor space up top with them.
Okay. And do you have like working concepts? Do you have sketches that you could share with us of these various models that you're talking about?
We have full-on construction drawings, Joe. We've got all the things. Yeah, we're submitted for permit on these products. And we actually are going to be, and I'll be happy to share it with you guys too. We're going to be doing a pretty substantial marketing and PR push. We're going to be generating virtual renderings. We think what's going to be interesting is how do we communicate to the buying public how these homes work? Because a stacked duplex of this style, the funny anecdote is my mom is 66. She lives in a condo right now and she wants to move from Seattle to Portland because my brother and I live down here. And I'm trying to describe to her, Mom, you could have this downstairs unit. She's like, I don't get it. What do you mean there's 2 people living in it, but it looks like one house? I don't. And I'm like, let me show you a picture. Okay, let's try to walk that. Let me take you to the neighborhood. And it just was like impossible, but she's not purchased new construction ever. And when we think about middle housing, chances are the people who are purchasing middle housing have never purchased a house, period, right? Let alone new construction. So how do we educate them? How do we show them how this product will work for them? So that's where we're going to be doing. We've got virtual tours that are going to be fly-throughs of the actual full floor plan that are 3D renderings. We'll be doing the traditional new home builder architectural renderings for the exterior. So we do have the pencil sketches and colored elevation example. And really the product that we've designed that's going to get used in Tigard, we would love to have repeatability to use in other jurisdictions. That's really how, for us, from the R&D side of the business, makes sense, right? We have a return on this product that we've created.
And
so
can I stop you for a moment? So of the ones that you've described, which are you doing in River Terrace? Both.
So we're doing the 60 wide. Well, it's actually now a 40 wide triplex on a 60-ish lot because we've got the side loaded driveway. And the triplexes always have to be built in a pair because the side load garages, we're trying to not triple the amount of garage or driveway access. So they end up being built in pairs with side loads, and happy to show you guys some footprints and elevations of how this looks as it is kind of.
And one more question on that. Are those triplex 3 on a lot, or are they fee simple with lot lines?
They're 3 on a lot, so they will be condo execution. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chelsea, let me pose the same question to you. MLG, have you built any middle housing projects or done the land development that then sold to others to do it? And the range of types that I'm talking about, are from duplex or 2-unit townhome over to fourplex or 4-unit townhome, anywhere in that range.
Well, I should let you know that I'm relatively new at this position. I've only been with MLG for 5 months, and I am just the assistant planner. So it's going to be hard for me to give you a really solid answer on that. We just do land development and
Right.
prep the lots and then sell to builders who then sort of tend to make more of those decisions, I believe. Like I said, it's hard for me to answer. But I would imagine that there has been situations where we've at least prepped, the land to be, in fact, yes, for sure. There has been situations where we've prepped land to be developed for what would probably be considered middle housing.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Let's go to our next question that we have. I want to get a little, I know it depends on every site and is a little different in where you are in the community, but let me take a little poll with you guys. Starting with by type. So let's go to townhomes. On a scale of strong, medium, or weak, how would you rate the market demand for townhomes? And that's whether it's 2 units or 4 units in Wilsonville.
Based on what we're seeing at Mont Blanc, it's strong. I could be sold out tomorrow if we wanted to be. And that's a 3-story up to 6 units in a building, 5 and 6 units.
Yes, 6 is the biggest one we have.
And those are 1-car garage, no driveway. So that's another thing with middle housing is considerations for parking, especially with when we think about Wilsonville as far as transportation corridors. I think there was a little bit of concern initially about, well, how is a 1-car garage going to be received in this area that doesn't have the max or,
right,
have traditional public transportation? It's been fine. There's enough street parking for guests. And the plans that we do are up to 3 bedrooms as well. So it's not that there aren't 2 people in that home with 2 vehicles, but those are 1-car garage, no driveway. And so I would say demand for, and it may, and this is where it's tough, is it townhome or is it price point? Right. I think right now I could say it's high for both. Okay.
Roseanne, let me go over to you from the HBA perspective, maybe what you're hearing from members or what you've, your sense of strong, weak, or medium for townhomes in Wilsonville.
I agree with Elena. It's strong.
Okay.
I would say primarily because of the price point. Your land values are so high. Not you, and not just Wilsonville, but since we're talking about Wilsonville, the land values really can, up until this bill, could really only dictate, nicely finished single family detached home in the expansion areas. Because it had to accommodate, it had to build in the price of the land, and in addition to, permitting and development fees, and then hard costs for the vertical. So now with this new opportunity for townhomes, you realize a new best use for the land, right? By being able, maybe not quite double, but somewhere approaching double the best use of the land with a townhome product. And then being able to sell those individually to a household that would never, ever be able to buy the homes that have already been constructed in Frog Pond West, right? And even the least expensive, right, is like what, $500,000? They will, there are so many households that would never be able to afford that. But in the new price point, right, granted, it's not going to be $250,000 at the cheapest. It's because every unit is going to need to have the expensive items like a kitchen,
right,
a bathroom, some hard surfaces, and those are like really, a energy efficient furnace and water heater, etc. So, those are the expensive items. You're not going to get away from that, no matter how you cut the cheese. But like, you can realize a lower price point just simply by utilizing the land more efficiently. And that's what the bill is meant to do. That's what middle housing is meant to do.
Okay.
Utilize the land by being able to get more units on it, whether it be vertically or horizontally, primarily horizontally in this case. But
Chelsea, anything you want to add on this question? It's okay to say don't know yet, but anything to add on the strength of the market for townhomes?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I actually don't know that I can really speak to that. And I also stepped away briefly for a minute. So
Okay.
I'll pass on this one. Thank you, though.
Okay. But let's take the next variation on that. Erase the lot lines and answer my question relative to plexes. So it's condo arrangement, or I guess it's the owner renting out a couple of units or whatever. Same question. Is the market strong, medium, or weak?
I think that the challenge that I think we're going to come up just as a builder community, a developer community, as well as just a jurisdiction level as we think about middle housing, is how new this product really is, and that there isn't a ton of it in the market for people to be comfortable with. And I think to Roseanne's point, the thing that is going to be the compel is going to be the price. It has to be a compelling price. And I was clicking around. What I wanted to share with you guys is just the average sales price of the townhomes that we're selling at Mont Blanc are in the low threes. They're sub 350 as an average sales price. And so to get a duplex, triplex, or a quadplex product, that would be, so this is my concern when we talk about duplex, triplex, quadplex, is we don't want to create an opportunity for investors. We want to create an opportunity for home ownership. And so when we go into a situation like this, even people within my own company who are employees of ours, they're like, I want to buy one of the duplexes so that I can rent out both of those units and get 2 units of income as opposed to 1. That's going to be a hard thing for us to avoid as a builder community. We will have to make selling decisions, and our contracts read that there's a 12-month or 12-month owner occupancy clause when they purchase from us, but there's nothing that we can actually do to enforce that other than fining them through the HOA, frankly. So that, I think, becomes the challenge. If the price is right, I think there will be a high level of interest, because it will be the only thing that they will be able to choose from, because all of the resale in Wilsonville continues to also appreciate, because it is a young housing market. They are a lot of new construction, so they've aged really well. People have taken really good care of their homes, remodeled, so their values continue to appreciate and continue to be inaccessible to the buyer profiles that need to be sub 500,000. And that's how we think about middle housing, although there isn't an affordability component, and will help us if we ever income qualify any of this, because I think that that's actually far more exclusionary than we think it is. Having sold in several income qualified neighborhoods previously, what we need is accessible price points, and that's where the duplex, triplex, quadplex provide that opportunity. I don't really think buyers have any real knowledge in this price point about what it means to be in a condo. Yeah. I don't know that it scares them. I think what scares them is the add of $200 a month to their mortgage. That, I think, is what actually is what they relate to. It's not, am I going to have to replace the roof on all 4 units in 15 years and negotiate with my HOA on how to do that? I think we as a community perceive the litigation as an issue, and that's the barrier to entry with developers. I don't think it's necessarily the barrier to entry with your customer and actually who is going to be making a purchasing decision. It's, are they going to become house burdened?
Let me jump in and sort of see if, Roseanne, you have any thoughts on this. If we're talking plexes, sense of strong, medium, or weak for as far as market demand?
From the household's perspective, I think that the market will continue to be strong for rental, despite the fact that Wilsonville, needs more home ownership opportunities. A rental like a duplex, triplex, quadplex will continue to be strong because it's additional units that are, being put into the market. From a developer's perspective, they will only build them if their pro formas to their investors and to their banks or wherever they're getting their money show that this is a viable product. So there is going to be some initial testing out of the market. Probably, you're going to get your onesie, twosie, little plexes going. And then once those comparables are established, and you have, an employee of Taylor Morrison that buys a triplex and rents out the other 2 units to their, grandmother and their coworker or whatever it is, and is making the mortgage payment on that, because you can, as a home buyer, you can get financing fairly easily in 4 units and below, compared to 5 units and above, which the banks and lending institutions consider that like a multifamily product. So, and they require, there's a commercial code you have to build to, different requirements from the contractor's perspective, more liability. So therefore, and that translates into the lending products that are available for a homeowner to purchase a 5+ plex. Now, but with 4 or fewer units in a plex, there are more financing products available to the general home buyer market. And so I think as long as the developer can show in their pro forma to the investor that yes, people will buy these, and they start out strong and can prove the comparables, then you will continue to have a strong demand from the developers as well, because they'll be able to prove to their investors or their lending institutions, hey, look, we sold it. It's not in foreclosure. It's realizing, like people are paying their mortgages and renting out the units and positive cash flow.
But it's going to take some time and experience with all that to build up the confidence.
On the plex, because it lends itself towards a rental option.
Yeah. So on cluster housing, let's assume fee simple, that all the small homes are on their own lot. There's a tract that is the central courtyard or green, and we've defined them clearly in the code. So they're 1,400 square feet and less, or whatever it is. Market strength, just kind of quick hit, or comments about kind of certainties, uncertainties about the product.
I'll say just really quickly on cluster, I think because of the square footage, you have to consider doing detached garages, which is unique and unusual for our market in new construction specifically. So again, I think it has the strength of demand due to price, but again, will be a completely different consumer product that would need acceptance, but I think would continue to be high because of the price point. So 1,400 square feet, if you've ever tried to design one with more than a 1-car garage, and frankly, any garage, it creates a very unlivable floor plan over 2 stories. So it has to be a detached garage execution. And then we have to have different conversations about site planning and infrastructure for a neighborhood like that. That would be cottage cluster primarily, or just how would we even incorporate that into a traditional single family or other middle housing. So again, price for all of middle housing types, I think will be compelling, because there is nothing else. It will just be what's the absorption and pace of those products over time.
Okay. Roseanne, do you have any comments on
Strength, especially
cottage cluster?
Cottage cluster strength, especially for retirees or people who are downsizing, I would say, regardless of the garage situation, because if you're downsizing, you're probably you don't have as many things to store, or maybe as many vehicles or what have you. At the beginning of this session, I did recommend a builder called Hayden Homes, who has been a very great partner on all this missing middle housing conversations at the state level, as well as at the local level. In Bend, they have executed brilliantly cottage cluster formations with the right balance of parking, garages, and yes, they are. I think they have a detached model, and I think they also have an attached model. Of course, that, like Elena said, it needs to be bigger. As you know, the state code will allow, for Wilsonville, should they choose to accept it, just the 900 square foot footprint, but you could do 2 stories. And from that standpoint, if you have, a 1,700 square foot house, 1,750 maybe, you can get an attached garage and even get 3 bedrooms in there, with a decent master and a medium-sized kitchen, powder on the bottom. So it's definitely something to consider, because that's a family, that's kind of what you call a family-sized home, 2 to 3 bedrooms. You can have a couple kids, or
Right. The 2-story cottage.
or a cottage.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Quick hits on ADUs in a word or two.
Limited viability for us. Kind of to the point that Roseanne made, a kitchen costs the same regardless of the square footage of the rest of the house. So when you don't have the square footage to get the revenue for most of what we do, it comes down to a price per square foot calculation. So ADUs, this is where I was asking the question about how are you going to consider your building types. The triplex that we're doing and the stacked duplex we're doing in Tigard, the smaller of the units in those plans are technically being called ADUs right now. They won't be another, this is their first foray into middle housing. It may not be ADUs going forward. So really it's just kind of semantics at this point of we just didn't have anything in their code to call it. But I think if we're thinking of a detached accessory dwelling unit under 1,000 square feet, it just really isn't viable unless it was an option and a homeowner had a lot big enough that when they came to a builder, they could say, I would like to buy a detached ADU that you would build, and there would be subsequent markup for that on the builder side.
Okay. Roseanne?
Yeah, I think right now, and for a while, it's going to remain in the the out-of-pocket financing from the homeowner, if they want to do it, as a custom build, right? They hire X developer to do that, or they have acquired enough equity in their home to be able to do like a cash out refi or something, or just take money out of savings and finance it. There are some models where companies will, nonprofits in particular, will agree to build the ADU or design it, build it, and then take some part of the equity upon resale down the line, or they'll take some part of the rental income as an incentive to having it be like a lower price point to install or to build. But without those type of incentives, either from the nonprofit market or private, I think that it's going to be your more affluent homeowners that can do that either from the very beginning with a custom build, or once they've acquired more equity in their home.
Okay. All right. Dan, let's skip ahead to a couple of slides to, let's see. Yeah. So let's talk the development code, and I'll sort of simplify the question here. I understand the fees issue and non-zoning kinds of things we've talked about, but for the development code itself, if there are 1 or 2 things that we really need to get right or fix, what are those to make middle housing successful?
So I think your setback requirements, okay, so yeah, setbacks and height, of course. Although, so with duplexes, you're not gonna, it can't be anything different than a single family detached house. With triplexes and quads, there's gonna be a little bit more siding and design standard flexibility.
Yep.
So if we're talking about the options that allow more flexibility, yeah, really taking a hard, cost benefit analysis look at the setbacks and the height allowances and design standards, reducing, arduous design standards so that it doesn't have to go through like a bunch of extra review processes.
Mhm. Okay.
It's going to be the way that goes.
Elena, anything come to mind, or Chris?
I was going to say parking is a big one. Just how many vehicles per unit and what considerations for allowable on-street or off-street parking.
Right.
Yes.
We're at one per unit to start right now in Wilsonville.
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, the parking definitely, and if there's any, setbacks that Roseanne talks about, and then open space requirements, because sometimes when you get those duplexes, or excuse me, those triplexes and quads, you're eating up a majority of your lot, and then if you're having to meet some open space requirement, that gets kind of hard to be able to get a product in.
Mm-hmm.
What the open space requirements are.
Okay.
So maybe I have a specific question for that Chris may be most familiar with this. So, we've told the community that, okay, we can only require one parking space per unit. That's what the state rules say. But then the conversation goes, okay, how can we go to making sure that those garages or units are open and available for parking? I know in this Sienna condos in the Village Center specifically, we actually required signs in the garages saying keep this area cleared for parking.
Huh.
Just curious, do you think that sort of approach is feasible kind of on a broader scale? Or if you've heard anything from buyers or residents about that approach that we use there?
I haven't heard any direct feedback, negative or positive, on that, Dan, at all on that perspective. I know that on some of the apartment complexes that we've built in the past, we would do random audits to ensure that tenants are using the garages for parking instead of storage. I don't think you could do that on a for sale because, it's privately owned at that point. You're basically not going to go into somebody's private property to ensure what they're putting in their garage. But I haven't heard, when it comes to Villebois, I haven't heard any negative or positive stuff as far as the parking is concerned. On some of our other master plan communities, parking has been one of the complaints, but I think over the last 5 years, maybe stronger, I have not heard any. We do a lot of surveys. I have not seen a lot of surveys come back in the last 5 or so years that talk about frustrations with parking, to be honest with you. Have you seen anything, Lena, from that perspective from our customers?
It's pretty limited. They're pretty good about self-policing each other. So if a neighbor leaves their garage open during the summer, they'll call up the HOA and ask them to find them. I to Chris's point, I don't think that we could necessarily regulate that. I think there's been attempts all over the place, and with the middle housing like product that I've sold, and we've managed neighborhoods in other markets too. Sometimes you just get a good neighborhood and they're really good about using their garages for parking, and some of them do just store everything in them, and there's nothing you can really do to mitigate that. You have to make clear that there is fines in your CC&Rs and not be lackadaisical about that. But I know that tends to be a concern from the community about, well, now all my roads are going to be clogged up with people parking on the street. And then we don't actually hear anything as far as complaints from surrounding neighborhoods or even within the neighborhood. There's this fear, this perception. It's the NIMBY kind of mentality of, well, if you bring it, they will come. They will, but they're not bad people, right? They have pride of ownership. They're not here to destroy the integrity of your neighborhood or the value of your home. So I don't know if there's a real way that we could manage that. The signage will help, but we can't really enforce that once it's closed.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on that one where Elena's talking about where if they do start storing stuff in the garage, they start parking on the street. One of the caveats, people think that, now we have nowhere to park, but in reality, what it does is it slows down the through traffic through the neighborhoods. You don't have the cars driving fast through the neighborhoods because you're parking on both sides of the street and you're limiting the drive exposure.
So I'm mindful of the time here. And we really appreciate you giving us a bit of your afternoon. Let's go to the last question. I want to circle back to this issue, this concept of making a 2 or 3 unit structure look like a single family home, because we're hearing that as an emerging theme as we talk about plexes and what uses to allow in Frog Pond West or elsewhere. People are saying things like, well, I can get behind it if it looks like a single family home from the street. So I think we've heard that you're rolling with that concept some on some products. So what features do you focus on? Can you kind of circle back to that and how we can make the code supportive of that outcome?
I would say articulation. So different facades, either on the front or the side. So bump ins, bump outs, different a roof line as well is important. So how you, if you have like a modern roof line, maybe you have the two coming like this rather than, ching, 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 ching. Or I guess, sorry, I'm blanking on my other thing I was going to say. Well, if you have a corner lot, of course, you can have, one entrance on each side. So that helps a lot. But if you have an interior lot, then yeah, I guess, oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. So staggering the homes so that they're not just like flat when you're looking at them from the street and they just look like mirror images of each other. If they're staggered a bit, then it looks like, oh, like that's a cool design. Like they staggered one of their garages to be in front of the other.
Okay, very helpful.
Elena and Chris, you probably have lots of ideas.
Other ideas?
Share my screen because I pulled up one of the images of one of our exteriors. I think one of the things when we
let me stop the sharing.
I don't even know. Can I share? Don't know if I.
At the bottom, there should be a share screen.
Yeah, and you're enabled to share from my end.
Hey.
So,
there we go.
Top secret, guys. Don't tell anybody else about this. We're trusting you. So this is one of those triplex units that's going to replace a 60 wide single level. And this front unit is the only one in the front. And then you can see the door to the far left. That's actually for the middle unit. And then as you would continue back, that is the third door. So and you can see that you've got the car on the right-hand side. So it's a side loaded garage. So they'd be built in pairs. So just flip that on the reverse. And what I was going to say is even if we had 2 units on this front plan, one of the things that I think a lot of jurisdictions do is they're like, we want to have variety in the architectural elements for each unit. And that's where I think a lot of people don't like townhomes, because you go blue and then it's red and then it's green and then it's brown. And you just have this color palette on a 5-plex that's just obnoxious and it doesn't integrate well with the community. So very simply, it's how do you create a facade, a front elevation, if you will, primarily, that the way that you integrate the different materials and roof lines don't make it look like it's 2 to 3 homes. Yep. They need to be integrated across, because these are going to, and I put this in the note to Miranda about HOA dues and how do we maintain these buildings as a homeowner group or an association. Most of those budgets are going to go to exterior maintenance, and most of them are going to be owned as a common element together. So there's no need for us to delineate a separate unit, because nobody needs to delineate it. If they're reciting it, they're reciting the whole thing for all units. So part of it is an integrated exterior elevation that doesn't separate units out. And honestly, just the exterior paint colors to be integrated and not this crazy contrast from door to door, if you will. And then let me see, I think we've got, so this is one of the basement executions of a triplex.
Mhm.
This is the tuck under version. So on the right-hand side is where the garage would be. But this is the stacked duplex execution. So like I described, you've got what looks like a 3-car garage, single family detached unit. That 1 bedroom goes straight to the back. You've got the top floor unit that has its own private covered deck. The doorway to the back bottom unit is around the side. And
Mhm.
so both of these look like they're just a single family home. And I think, you know, the articulation's a big thing. The setbacks are a big thing. The eaves also from an architectural standpoint, right? Of how are we handling with eaves relative to fire rating and how do those encroach in setbacks or not? So that's kind
Okay.
of
Thank you so much for showing those. Yeah, if you could send us a set of some representative middle housing things you have going, then we can kind of test these questions against about what you have drawn up. Okay. Well, boy, awesome. Thank you so much for rolling with that and providing all those answers. We're time to finish up here, Dan. Last comments, next step type things from you?
Sure. I want to express my appreciation for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us. I think it's been really beneficial for us to hear this. I do want to throw up on one more slide. And just, I think most of you have my contact information, but certainly Polly, there's my email address, the project website, Let's Talk Wilsonville, has a project page. Again, we're continuing this over work sessions next few months with adoption, summer, fall. So really hope to be able to continue this conversation and look forward to how stuff goes in Tigard for you, Elena and Chris. And Roseanne, keep in contact and send any other builders that couldn't make it today our way, and we're happy to talk through things with them as well.
Great.
So,
And then Dan, if you guys end up formulating a infrastructure meeting that would be appropriate for the development community to be a part of, or just HBA, I would be more than happy and interested in having those discussions about, you know, what does it look like to think about SDCs creatively for middle housing?
okay, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Miranda, did you want to add anything at the end here?
Not necessarily, except to say thank you very much. This was a very informative discussion. I really appreciated your time and input in thinking about this. As a city, we want to be able to provide housing opportunities for everyone who lives here and everyone who wants to live here. It's an amazing city that we all care about very deeply. And so we want to make sure that the people who want to live here can live here, whether that's buying their first home, buying their last home, renting. We'd love to see all of these middle housing types be built in many different forms and different price points and different ownership or rental structures, just because we know that people need different types of homes at different types of times in their lives. I love the one product that has the base unit. It's a 1-story unit. It provides units to some of our citizens who have less mobility. And that's something that I become increasingly concerned with as we continue to have smaller footprints that are more vertical in nature because of land prices. And that is a real problem. And how do we get around that? So I'm really encouraged by the work that you guys are doing. And I hope that we have an opportunity to partner together more and learn more as we go through this process. So thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to call it then. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. We are done.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.